la civiltà dell'amore. Fratelli e sorelle, costruite senza stancarvi mai questa civiltà. Lavorate per questo, pregate per questo, soffrite per questo.
Buonasera.
So, good afternoon everybody, and welcome to the Rimini meeting. Thank you very much, because there are so many of you today. This meeting is entitled The Christ of the Via Emilia, from Guareschi to present day. I'd like first of all to thank the group of friends of Giovannino Guareschi, who also organized the exhibition Route 77. It's in pavilions B2, sorry. And then I would also like to thank our guests. Our guests are here with me. I'm going to introduce them. We have Gianni Covi, actor and director. And we have Maestro Corrado Medioli, who is an accordion player, internationally renowned player. Mr. Eugenio Martani, the director of the Casanova Cantoni concert. And then we have the protagonists of this evening, that is to say, the ones who are going to tell us their own Christ. Our priests, Daniel Cardenas from the monastery of Santa Maria degli Angeli in Busseto, Parma. Don Luigi Valentini, the founder of the Betania community in Parma. Don Giancarlo Plessi, the president of the Manfredini Center in Piacenza. Don Daniele Benecchi, the military chaplain of the Finance Police in Bologna. And Don Pier Laurent Cabantu, the parish priest of the Cervia Cathedral. So I introduce them to you by order of appearance, because this is how they will appear here on stage. But let us now start, together with Giovannino Guareschi, let us now start talking about this Christ of the Via Emilia. So the environment is a piece of the Po Valley. And here I must point out that for me, the Po begins in Piacenza. The fact that from Piacenza upwards it's always the same river means nothing. Even the Via Emilia from Piacenza to Milan is always the same road. But the Via Emilia is the one that goes from Piacenza to Rimini. You cannot make a comparison between a river and a road, because roads belong to history and rivers to geography. And the history is not made, so what? History is not made by men. Men suffer history as they suffer geography. This is how I start having my characters work, by writing about 350 novels on them, with other unpublished novels, as they are used only to prepare the 5 films with the 2 protagonists. The village of Mondo Piccolo is a little black dot that moves together with its Pepponi and its Smilzi up and down the river, along that slice of land between the Po and the Apennines. In the short stories, you already see Don Camillo and the left-wing leader Peppone, not yet mayor. He would become mayor in the 6th short story, Scuola Serale, the evening story. And the voice of Christ immediately appears. These are 2 real characters, not 2, but 20 or 40 priests and 20 or 40 communists concentrated in 2 characters. And these 2 characters are ultimately one single character, that is me. Christ is also me, because, as is clear, the voice of Christ is but the voice of my conscience. The events recounted really happened. A little from all sides, you understand? Or they are invented. But the truest ones are the invented ones, because after I had invented them, they really happened, and often in a very improbable way. The environment in which my characters operate is my camp, is my village. It is the lower Po Valley, the flat strip of fat land lying along the right bank of the Po River.
In piazza.
In the square, parliamentary candidate Giuseppe Bottazzi, known as Pepone, prepared his dust rally and harangued the crowd from the loudspeaker. Citizens, before we begin our speech in this final rally, we would like to hope that certain people, if they do not have the good sense to mind their own business, at least they will have the good taste not to repeat their abuses. We have been told that these certain people are planning acts of sabotage with the aim of disturbing our meeting as they once did. At the Garden City, Don Camillo, also equipped with powerful loudspeakers, announces the start of the children's party. My dear brothers, our little show will begin with a song. A sweet little song performed by the child Marco Bottazzi. Pepone shudders, but quickly recovers and hangs up. Citizens, in this concluding rally, the front of United Italy. Hearing his little son's voice singing, he stops again. When the child makes his final high note, Pepone holds his breath for fear that he will make a mistake. And when he finishes among applauses, he lets out a sigh that disengages his carburetor. Everyone applauds and shouts, "Good!" The people close to Pepone congratulate him with big pats on the back. Pepone finally returns as a candidate and resumes, "Citizens, as I was telling you in this concluding rally," but he doesn't manage to finish this time either because Don Camillo's loudspeaker hangs up. And now, a small choir in which these good children participate, namely Marco Bottazzi, Luigi Bruschi. At each name, Brusco, Smilzo, Lungo, Bigio, etc., they gasp because these are the names of their children. Smilzo is the first to recover. Boss, the freebooter, has chosen the sons of all our comrades. Pepone finds tranquility and tries to resume. "Citizens, we have the pleasure of telling you," but the voice of the little ones in the Garden City is too attractive, and they all leave, little by little. A round of applause resounds after the children's chorus, and Don Camillo resumes. "And now the children Bottazzi, Bruschi, Scartazzini, all of them, all the children of Pepone's faithful ones, and each one of them, on hearing their name, has a fit. They will perform a little pantomime called Ali Baba and the 40 Thieves. Be careful not to miss a movement, because every movement has a meaning." The pantomime begins. As if by magic, the square is deserted. All the comrades are there in front of the Y mesh. Smugly, they point at each other. Pepone is in the front row.
Io non ce l'ho.
dopo come si prosegue?
Don Daniel Cadrenas.
So the floor to Don Cadrenas. So good afternoon, everyone. I'd just like to introduce myself very briefly because I have little time. My name is Daniel Cardenas. I am a missionary. We are missionaries. That's a Spanish order. I come from Ecuador, so I am the only one coming from the new member from the group. Ever since I consecrated to the group in 2009, I was sent 2 years to Rome for many years, and now I live in Busseto, near to Roncole Verdi, where we have Alberto, the son of Guareschi, and I've been living there for 3 years in the convent in Busseto. And actually, in these 3 years, I've really fallen in love with the area, of the low Po Valley, with the food, of the people, Guareschi, the culture of the area. And I'm really very, very, very honored to be here with you. I feel fortunate, and I am also very touched. So the Christ of the Via Emilia. This is also a very difficult task, to give a face to that Christ that Guareschi mentions a lot, talks about a lot. And actually, I continue to talk about this Christ on the occasion of the meeting of this year entitled "The Passion for the Person." I was asked to talk about the Christ that I live every day, especially in the children, in the young boys and girls, as you probably understood from the bit that has been pronounced. I feel I have a great vocation towards children and young people, and that's also a great responsibility, a major responsibility. Our community devotes a lot of time to people who have lost their faith and to those who have never had it. So I've spent many years dealing with young people and children. So these days, thinking about what I could say, I wondered where this strong vocation comes from. I think it comes from a day on which I was 15 years old. I served as a volunteer in Thailand with my brother. We spent there 2 months. We were in the north of Thailand, and there was a school with young people studying there. They couldn't go home because it was very far away from the villages, and everybody was sleeping there. There was 70 young people. And I remember, I don't have very clear memories, but I remember a special night, a specific night in which we were sleeping on the floor, and before falling asleep there was a guy who might have been a couple of years younger than I was, who before falling asleep turned towards me, looked at me, and I don't speak Thai, but he looked at me and told me something in Thai. He told me brother, looking me in the eyes. That was probably the only word he knew in English, brother. And that was the only word with whom he could express something he had inside, maybe a request he had. But he was holding my arm, and there was a very strong request. Not so explicit, he himself didn't probably know what he was asking. But I've often thought about that, and I think that my vocation towards children and young people comes from that specific night. The idea, my intention is basically to try and reply to that request. Because if you're dealing with young people, you know that they all ask from you, they all request from you with facts, with music, with the music they listen to, with the things they do. Even if they perform bad things, they ask questions, they ask adults, they ask the adults to respond to those questions. And they look for nice things. Sometimes it's easy to criticize young people, For example, as early as in Jesus' times, the apostles, he would reproach them, telling them, let them come to me, because young people actually look for good things. I recall a conversation with an 18-year-old where we're talking about love, relationships, and I was proposing to him another different way of living love relationships. And he was surprised because he had never thought about love relationships in a different way. And he said, well, yes, it's beautiful. This is true. So young people put forward requests to us, and we have to respond. We have to answer. How can we answer young people and children when they express a request? And I think the only way I have is to fall in love with Christ every day, because I consecrated my life to Him, and this is what young people and children are looking for. They are in a way following someone who is in love. When I was younger, I fell in love with mathematics, with young children, young people, and with God. And I didn't fall in love just by chance. That happened to me because I met people who were in love with Christ and who were in love with mathematics. So this is my passion for God and for children and young people.
Ci sarò io.
I'll be there at the door of purgatory in case you ever get there by mistake, to kick you out of hell. So said my old parish priest, who looked a lot like Don Camillo. Save yourself the trouble, Reverend, I would then reply. I'm going straight to heaven. After that, the parish priest would give me a scolding and then teach me how to do my Latin homework. So wrote Giovannino Guareschi, recalling his first Don Camillo, the colossal Don Lamberto Torricelli, parish priest of Marore, where the future writer had moved with his parents. Don Lamberto, before being a giant priest, was first and foremost an extraordinary priest. He published from his parish the festive flying leaflet, The Shepherd's Voice. This is something that also Don Camillo did under a different title. He had set a kitchen of the poor. Don Camillo even went poaching to give a chicken to all the poor at Christmas. And for young people, he had founded one of the first cultural youth clubs. Who does not remember Don Camillo's garden city for young people? But not only that, Don Torricelli did 108 days in prison in 1918 at the height of the World War for having distributed the prayer of peace by Pope Benedict XV to soldiers. Today in Marore, on the outskirts of Parma, there is the Betania community to carry on this Christmas witness of mercy and love.
C'era il prete.
Credo che
I believe that we really needed Serpentini's fantasy to think of a title like this one, The Christ of the Via Emilia, since he is familiar with Guareschi. Therefore, he has put these two elements together. This land, which is, well, red, so to speak. These people who are active, this church that tries to step forward, but constantly is in constant need of novelties. In 1981, the Italian Bishops' Conference published a very small document which was extraordinary and beautiful, entitled The Italian Church and the Country's Prospects. A few years later, a couple of years later, in the community where I used to live, in the periphery of Parma, which was a new church that was built in the green fields around the city. In that new church, we were working on peace, and many young people decided not to do their military service and to do social services instead, what is called the civil service, instead of a military service for the state. So that was the first group of 7 people that started studying that document. At Articles 4 and 5, we could read things that could have been written today. Article 4 reads, "The economic and social progress that Italy has developed since the post-war years is in many ways undeniable, but alongside with it, regressive elements have also asserted themselves that led to the loss of values without which it is impossible for that progress to be true and fruitful for the common good." And this is something we are realizing today. And the article goes on, "But first of all, we must decide to start again from the last ones, who are the dramatic sign of the current crisis." With that group of young people, boys and girls, their girlfriends, who used to come to our church, we decided that we had to do something. So we decided to open our eyes and look at the situation in our region, and we realized how many problems there were, how many families there were who lived in difficult situation owing to the new and the old forms of poverty. We were in the 1980s, and there was the migration flow from southern Italy towards northern Italy. People were looking for jobs, and the families that arrived in northern Italy didn't have any means, and they had to find a way to live in very precarious situation. But there was also another phenomenon, that is to say, the problem of drug addiction. So that's why we decided to start and open our houses, our homes, so that they could become a place where people could find back a way to free themselves from addiction, and where they could find help, where they could find people with the necessary skills, and places where they were not exposed to the addiction. The Bishop of Parma at the time was Benito Cocchi. He was also then the Bishop of Modena. And a Sunday afternoon he came and told me, you need a small parish, a small church, but a big rectory. And so we started working and we founded the community Betania in 1983. It was founded in the rectory of Marore, where I was a parish priest and where Father Torricelli used to live. And we saw a picture of him just a few minutes ago. He was the priest of Marore, and his mother, who was a teacher, Miss Lina. She was a teacher at the primary school in Marore. So the whole family moved to Marore because of this job. And Giovannino went to the parish priest for his Latin lessons. So that's how he met Father Torricelli. And this is an encounter that was particularly significant also from the point of view of the values that this encounter created. Guareschi was not a young boy who used to go to church every day, but he did know the Christian values that are then described in the great character of Don Camillo. Guareschi, Don Camillo, the teacher, Miss Lina, and the Betania community. So this is a continuity in living Christianity where the word becomes a presence. It is looked for in the people. Pope Francis taught us that we have to look for the word in the outskirts of the cities. The old Via Emilia, the consular road, had a resting place in San Lazzaro, and then there was the Lazzaretto nearby, which was a hospice for people who had problems or were ill. This is where our community is located. So, well, the Betania community now has grown. There are 10 different seats that welcome people with the different problems, drug addicts, people who are ill, who are sick, people who don't have a house, immigrants, and lately a lot of young mothers with their children that come from the places where today war is ravaging. We have 130 people now housed in the community, and these people are trying to discover the real person, not through a place where you go to make some good deeds. It's a place where you live every day of your life, because that's where you rediscover, because you discover the beauty of the life of man. Thank you.
Gesù,
Jesus, forgive me for making the altar on the bell tower now, and I'm going to celebrate the Holy Mass up there. But with the flood, there's a meter of water on the church's floor. Christ sighed, Don Camillo, what are you doing here? Isn't your place among your people? Jesus, my people are here. The bodies are far away, but with their hearts, they are all here. Don Camillo, your arms are strong, and they remain here, idle, while they could be used to help the weakest. Don Camillo slept for a long time because that boundless silence weighed on his brain and numbed him. Someone was calling him, and so Don Camillo turned on his torch and explored the water under the window. Inside a large boat, there was a bundle of rags moving. Who are you? I am Rosa of the Maroli family, said the bundle of rags. My grandfather wants to see you. The old Maroli was at the end of his life. They wanted me to die as a dog in a hospital, he wheezed. I want to die as a Christian in my home. Mad, they said I was mad. They said you are mad too. The girl stood there motionless and mute, staring at the old man. Rosa, gasped the old man. Is it true that you're mad? The girl said, no, shaking her head. My head hurts sometimes, and then I don't understand properly anymore, she said shyly. Her head hurts, that's it, said the old man. When she was little, she fell against a rock. Now she has a bone pressing on her brain. That professor said so, he told me, and with an operation everything would be all right. You will make her have this operation, said the old man. Pull my bed aside. There in the wall at the back. Remove that brick. Don Camillo pulled out the brick and found a bag that weighed like lead. Gold, gasped the old man. Gold stuff. Stuff of mine, and it's all for her. Let her have the operation, put her in the house of some decent person who will instruct her, who will educate her. We will show them whether we are crazy or not. Isn't that true, Rosa? The girl nodded. I want to die like a Christian, gasped the old man. Don Camillo sailed towards the church, and when he was in front of the high altar, he looked up and said, Jesus, you know. She said it. She wasn't afraid because she saw the light in my window and heard the bell. She is not crazy. She fell as a child, and with the operation she will be healed. You too fell as a child, poor Don Camillo replied, Christ, smiling, but you will never be healed. And so you will always listen more to your heart than to your brain. May God keep that blessed heart of yours intact. I want to thank Egidio for this invitation here at the meeting. I feel at home here. That's where I grew up, and this place gave me a lot as a man and as a priest. knowing that God intervenes in a very with gratuity in our lives. The encounters that God devised for us are such a pure gift that our nature couldn't have dreamt of them. So this gift is called grace. You cannot imagine how happy I am to listen to the contribution of these brothers of mine who talk about their passion for Christ, the true man, the true God, the beginning and the end of our lives. Today, I'm not going to talk about myself or my personal story. I'd rather talk about the life of a priest who's a friend of mine, Father Angelo. My own age, he was born in my village, and 40 years ago, he founded the Center Manfredini in Piacenza. The uniqueness of this center was the fact that this priest was always there to give his testimony and to promote cultural initiatives and moments of great spirituality, but above all, welcoming fragile people with whom he lived as in a family. I would like to talk about an event I shared with Father Angelo as children when we were already in love with Christ at his church. One day he asked me whether I could accompany him to the old people home in our village. I wasn't really happy to go there. It wasn't really one of my favorite places, but because he was my friend, I decided to follow him. When we got there in that big room full of elderly people, I understood that he was at ease there. He had a nice word and a smile for everyone, and everyone gave him smiles in exchange. So that's when I understood that was going to be his mission for all the years of his youth, and that was his vocation. During his years at the seminary, following the example of our Bishop Enrico Manfredini, we devoted ourselves to the parishes that we had been assigned, each of us according to the story we had met. Once we became priests, Father Angelo decided to live his very special vocation with no hesitations. In spite of all the difficulties, he starts to live this new experience together with the weakest and the neediest people. So this is the beginning of the Center Manfredini. They started with the help of a group of passionate young people and many grown-up volunteers who saw in this project a great opportunity to live their own Christian path. So while I've always asked myself, how can you live every single day in a reality that is so difficult? Taking care of the disabled, coordinating the work of the volunteers, organizing cultural meetings and events, hosting groups, living only of charity, always being ready to listen to anyone that asks to be heard. So this is what happened to so many people who could share this experience that is so rich in its simplicity. Father Angelo always gives the same answer. If Jesus was in my place, what would he do? We received precious gifts from the Lord. We just need to acknowledge them and thank him by offering our lives. So today I'm here to thank the Lord for this precious friendship that has accompanied me throughout my life. 4 years ago, my friend experienced a very difficult moment, and the center was in danger of shutting down. So the moment came for me to take a decision. We could not give up this significant and rich experience. So now I'm here as president of this project, temporary president of this project. We will have new projects in the future, but with the help of the volunteers, we will not lose what we have acquired thanks to the grace of the Lord. Jesus, said Don Camillo to the Christ on the cross, on the altar, I wait for them at Christmas. It's never happened in all the years I've been here that they've missed a midnight mass. And on Christmas night, they will come back. It is impossible for them to miss midnight mass at Christmas. When I was wanted by the police because of that mass, he came back on Christmas Eve, and I saw him there in that corner, wrapped up to his eyes in his coat. Jesus, trust me, I have always trusted you, replied Christ, smiling. But do you trust yourself? Well, I trust myself enough, but more than anything, I trust you. As Christmas approached, Don Camillo set his sails in motion, and the first news began to arrive. In the families, there were discussions between husbands and wives. The wives were beginning to say that, well, at least on Christmas Eve, the rule had to be broken. And Christmas Eve came, night fell, and the church was full of lights and singing. But sitting on the hard benches of the dingy hall of the Casa del Popolo, gloomy man listened in silence to Peppone reading stuff that nobody knew what it was. Every now and then, the night wind carried the notes of the church organ to stick against the window panes of the hall. The mass ended quickly because Don Camillo was nervous. He had a nail stuck in his brain, a nail that bothered him tremendously. Left alone in the church, he hastily undressed and went to bar the door with the bolt. Comrades, Peppone was saying, now, in order to worthily end this democratic meeting, vibrant with faith, I will read to you a masterly profile of Mao Zedong. When the door opened and a big man in a suit came by, he passed between the benches, arrived in front of the stage in which Peppone was standing, climbed the ladder, and opened his coat, took out an old grey-green box, which he violently put on Peppone's small table. All those in the first 2 rows of benches knew what that grey-green box was, because they had seen it many times in the mountains when Don Camillo risked bullets just to go up there. And those in the first 2 rows stood up. Don Camillo lifted the lid of the box, and the little field altar rose. In the meantime, Peppone had got up and got off the stage. Don Camillo turned for a moment and grunted. Then Strinto climbed up the ladder and arrived at Don Camillo's side, as he had done so many times up there. Then he helped him dress, lit the candles, and when the time came, knelt down beside the altar. It was a poor mass, soldier stuff, almost clandestine. But they had turned off the whole lights, and the candles on the little altar made a nice effect. And then the notes of the church organ, the ones that had come to stick to the window panes of the hall, were still alive and throbbing. And so there was also a distant music in the air.
Don Daniele.
So Father Daniele Benecchi. I haven't chosen this excerpt of, by Guareschi. So Egidio provokes me like that, and then he expects me to close everything in 5 minutes. So Peppone has threatened for 3 months to hit every communist not going to church. And actually, Peppone knows that without sacraments, all the men he knew actually run the risk of losing their eternal life. So he really hopes that they come back for the church. Don Camillo was a military chaplain during the Great War, the Big War, and he joined the partisans like Loris Capovilla, whom we all know as the secretary of John the 23rd, but very few people knew that he was the chaplain of the Navy. And as a matter of fact, in 1943, he was at the airport of Parma. He joined the partisan. So we now really hope that we will be able to entitle the airport of Parma under his name. So Don Camillo belongs to that group of priests who brought Christ to the fighters. He was not afraid of risks because he wanted to donate men with Christ. His companion of arms of the partisans left the church. They refused the church. And what did he do? He basically did what he had done in those years. He brought Christ to them. And this he did through the most gratuitous action that a priest can do. In other words, celebrating the Holy Mass. So the mystery of the Eucharisty is not a property of the priest. He's not asked to be creative. He's only asked to be faithful to something that does not belong to him, that is entrusted to him. The celebrating priest precisely applies the right of the church and donates his hands, his voice, his mind, and his heart to Christ. It is through him that he repeats gestures and words that are not his. And this way he can actually renew the sacrifice of Jesus. And this way Jesus Christ becomes present and donates himself to his brothers and sisters. He joins in communion with all of them through the Eucharistic. So Jesus Christ is made present through priests. If this is the case, well then the face of Christ for me is the face of my of the military chaplains. There are 7 priests now, 9 of them. They work in Piacenza and in Rimini, and they bring Christ to places where nobody would expect that Christ would go to them. Father Pietro in Piacenza, he had already left for 6 years, but when the chaplain, the military chaplain died, made himself available, and he's now following over 2,000 militaries with their families, and in the meantime he's built a new church. He requested help to Father Luigi, who was for 30 years the chaplain of the 5th Gruppo at the airport of San Damiano in Piacenza, but he's ill. So he's ill, and at least once a week he goes back to the airport to the people he's always loved and that he's always served. In Modena, the cadets of the military academy of the army are lucky enough, are fortunate enough to be with Father Marco. Father Marco is very young. He was ordered priest 2 years ago for the military, as military chaplain, and he's always there with the cadets. He encourages them to study or prepares them to a sacrament. He prepares them to visit the Pope or to launch with themselves to the departure. So he's the young person among young people. He's never the protagonist, however. He's the one who makes Jesus present among them. In Bologna, we have 3 military chaplains, myself, then Father Don Sergio. He's been only for 4 years, but he didn't want to leave his soldiers, the ones of the 2 regiments, another 4 commandos who are basically in all Bologna. He's a humble and silent person, and everybody knows that they can always knock at his door, even the people who never go to his chaplain. Don Giuseppe is a chaplain of the Carabinieri who work in the Emilia-Romagna, their families, and the Carabinieri who are now on leave. This means that his parish is scattered throughout all along the Via Emilia, from Piacenza to Rimini. Wherever you have a commando or a post of the Carabinieri. So his vocation actually came when he was a marshal of the Carabinieri. So he left the Carabinieri service to be at the service of God. And he's also the chaplain of us chaplains. He's our deacon, and he's the one who every morning greets us through WhatsApp. He coordinates our activities. And in return, we help him become saint because we force him to exercise virtues of patience and mercy in a very heroic way. In the area of Rimini, we have Don Marco, Father Marco in Rimini. He brought Christ to our soldiers twice, in Kosovo, twice in Afghanistan, in Bosnia, and in Lebanon. He's one of the many chaplains who had to answer the question that is always asked by our militaries when they are faced with the sufferings and the horrors they see in every type of war, in every type of conflict, wherever in the world. Why? And if God is good, why does God allow this suffering? And the only answer is the suffering Christ on the cross, who is present in any place in which you find pain and violence. And with his presence, he nourishes hope and the certainty that the good will win over the evil. And now in Cesena, you have the families of the militaries of the 15th group, and Don Marco, Father Marco, has built a real parish group. He's the priest of the community. And then in Rimini we have a new chaplain from Latina, Don Antonio, Father Antonio. He comes from Sardinia, and Father Francesco, also from Sardinia, after 7 years living in Rimini, will be moved to Ferrara to another commando of the Navy. Actually, in Ferrara there hasn't been a fixed chaplain in one of the biggest military areas there, and so if you have no chaplain, unfortunately communities will be disgregated. But when a chaplain is there, like Father Francesco, well, then the community will bloom again. will be created again. Father Mauro will also join this community. He has over 26 years experience, and he will bring Christ to the regiment of the railway workers and the 6th logistics regiment. So we have 9 priests scattered in all our region, bringing Christ to over 17,000 militaries, their families, the civilian employees. And we actually owe them a lot. We owe also a lot towards our bishop, Monsignor Marciano, because he's a priest, because he has a diocese that covers all over Italy, and that also goes outside Italy. Wherever you have Italian militaries, there is no base, no department, no mission, military mission abroad that he hasn't visited, that he hasn't seen, and where he hasn't celebrated Mass or baptized people. I think he's the only Italian bishop I know who had to wear a bulletproof jacket to celebrate Christmas and Easter with his Christians in Afghanistan and Iraq. So if you have met all the militaries, well, actually you've met a brother who was touched before ill people, or has whined over the tomb of Lazarus. So 9 chaplains and an archbishop, they are the face of Christ for me in my life.
Una sera,
One evening, Don Camillo was in church, absorbed in his prayers, when he heard the little door of the bell tower creak and did not even have the time to stand up that Peppone was standing in front of him. Peppone had a gloomy face, and he was holding one hand behind his back. He looked drunk, and his hair was hanging over his forehead. Slowly, Peppone drew his hand from behind his back and handed Don Camillo a big, long, narrow parcel. He placed the parcel on the altar rail, tore off the blue paper, and 5 long wax torches the size of a vineyard pole appeared. "He's dying," Peppone explained in a somber voice. Then Don Camillo remembered that someone had told him that Peppone's baby had been sick for 4 or 5 days, but Don Camillo had not paid much attention, believing it to be a small thing. "He's dying," Peppone said. "Turn them on at once." Don Camillo went to the sacristy to get some candlesticks, and having put the 5 big wax torches, he set about arranging them in front of Christ. "No," said Peppone. "That one there is one of your coven. Light them in front of that one there who doesn't do politics." When Don Camillo heard "that one there, the Madonna," he gritted his teeth and felt a mad desire to break Peppone's head. But he kept silent and went to arrange the lighted candles in front of the statue of the Virgin in the little chapel on the left. He turned towards Peppone. "Tell him," ordered Peppone in a harsh voice. Then Don Camillo knelt down and in a whisper told Our Lady that those 5 big candles were offered to him by Peppone so that she could help his child who was sick. When he got up, Peppone had disappeared. Passing in front of the high altar, Don Camillo quickly marked himself and tried to sneak away, but Christ's voice stopped him. "Don Camillo, what's the matter?" Don Camillo spread his arms wide in humiliation. "I'm sorry," he said. that he blasphemed like that wretch. Nor did I find the strength to say anything to him. How can you argue with a man who has lost his mind because his son is dying? You did very well, replied Christ. Politics is a damned business, explained Don Camillo. You must not hold it against him. You must not be harsh with him. And why should I judge him badly, whispered Christ. He honors my mother by filling my heart with sweetness. I am a little sorry he called her that one. Don Camillo shook his head. You have misunderstood, he protested. He said, light them all in front of the blessed Virgin who stands in that chapel there. Imagine if he had had the courage to say such a thing. Children or no children, I would have kicked him out. I'm really pleased that it's so, replied Christ, smiling, quite pleased. Talking about me, though, he said, that one. You can't deny it, said Don Camillo. In any case, I am convinced that he said it to make an insult to me and not to you. I'd swear to it. I'm so convinced. Don Camillo went out, and after 3/4 of an hour, he came back in full agitation. Did I tell you, he shouted, scoffing a parcel on the balustrade. He brought me 5 candles to light for you, too. What do you say to that? Well, this is all very nice, replied Christ, smiling. They are smaller than the others, said Don Camillo, but actually what matters in these things is intention. And then you have to bear in mind that Pepone is not rich. And with all the expenses of doctors and medicines, he actually got into trouble. This is all very nice, repeated Christ. Soon the 5 candles were lit, and it seemed as if there were 50, so brightly they shone. And truly they sent out much more light than the others, because they observed Don Camillo, and truly they sent out much more light than the others, because those were 5 candles that Don Camillo had run to the village to buy, getting the grocer out of bed and only giving a deposit because Don Camillo was poor. And all this Christ knew very well, and said nothing. But a tear slipped down from his eyes and streaked the black wood of the cross with a silver thread, and this meant that Pepone's baby was saved. And so it was.
Don Pierloranca Bantus.
È da 9 anni ormai che sono parroco a Cervia. Cervia, una città che Guareschi amava profondamente, era la città dove trascorreva le vacanze, dove aveva acquistato una casa che c'è tuttora. È una città dove avrebbe amato fossero girate anche alcune scene dei famosi film di Don Camillo, perché la chiesa del Duomo è proprio di fronte al palazzo comunale, siamo dirimpettai in una bellissima piazza tra l'altro. E a Cervia Guareschi morì il 22 luglio del 1968 e quindi nel 2018, nel 50° anniversario, sono state fatte tantissime iniziative a Cervia. Proprio in quell'occasione ho avuto la gioia di incontrare e il dono di incontrare Egidio Bandini per la presentazione di un suo libro molto bello, Don Camillo, un pastore con l'odore delle pecore, e da lì è nata un'amicizia che ci ha condotto fino a qui quest'oggi, al meeting. Francamente mai l'avrei pensato quando nei primi anni '80 da ragazzino frequentavo il meeting. E tutto questo, che cosa?
What did this cause to me, basically? All these initiatives that are linked to the anniversary of Guareschi's death actually raised in me again, a renewed love for smaller places. And I wondered, why is it that whenever we see a movie based on Guareschi's novels, why do we feel nostalgia? Even if back in those years we were not even born. The small world is a world that is always open to grace, in spite of the limitations, in spite of the many conflicts you may have. It's a world that is open to grace. I have always been struck by the fact that Cardinal Giacomo Biffi, when he was commented the short stories by Guareschi, used to say that Don Camillo had entertained a strong friendship with Christ, but the real theologist was Peppone, because actually the deepest questions, religious questions, were posed by Peppone. And as a matter of fact, both of them would live something that is no longer here today, namely, if the word family was uttered, Don Camillo and Peppone actually understood the same. Now this is no longer the same. If the word life was uttered, Don Camillo and Peppone would understand the same thing, would think the same thing. And the same applies to words like labor. Of course, they had clashes. There were clashes between the two. They supported different theses, but the realities, the real original questions, were the ones that characterized and still characterizes the so-called small world.
Questo ho cominciato a pubblicare.
So I started publishing some posts on Facebook, and I took inspiration by my dialogues with Christ on the cross, taking Don Camillo's dialogues with Christ as an example, as an expedient. And these dialogues are dialogues about many different topics: the value of prayer, the importance of sacraments, the educational emergency, or our relationship with young people. In other words, all the facts and events that may happen in a parish. And much to my surprise, the dialogues that I have started publishing on Facebook have become viral. They are shared, they're published, they're posted. So, just to give you an idea of this, and as I have very little time still available for my speech, I would like to rapidly read a last dialogue. The first dialogues are published in this book, Don Camillo a Cervia. The last dialogue has not yet been published. It's a short one, so I'm going to read out a dialogue on the communion, on the Holy Communion, and it's a dialogue that I entertained with Christ on the occasion of the First Communion, and the title of the dialogue is a special First Communion, and the voice of God is given by Egili Bandini. I see you tired, Don Pierloran, but in spite of this, you're full of joy. Yes, thank you, Jesus. Thank you for creating me, for making me Christian and a priest. For every priest, every First Communion is the reason of an incredible joy. But I will never forget the grace you've given me to make the experience of a special First Communion. More than 20 years have passed, but I felt touched whenever I still feel touched whenever I think of that communion. All First Communions are special, that's true. Jesus, I would like to explain to the First Communion of R, a young girl affected by Down syndrome who was very lively. She would rapidly go within an hour from being euphoric towards being cleric, and she could not stay seated for more than 10 minutes. And this would put the patience of her parents and of her teachers to strain. So she came to her first communion, and before the celebration of the Mass, her teachers actually made miracles to have her seat on her seat. And in spite of that, she managed to enter the sacristy while I was dressing for the Mass. So I was called, I turned, and she immediately explained, "You have immediately to go back to your place." So she was not feared by that, and actually she posed me a question. She said, "I have to ask you a question." And so I told her, "Yes, okay, but then you come back to your seat. Are you really sure that Jesus wants to come to the heart of someone like me?" And I didn't even know where to look at. Actually, my eyes were filled with tears, and actually with my voice filled with commotion, I answered, "Well, I tell you a secret. Today, Jesus is really looking forward to be welcomed by you." So she was satisfied and happy, came back to her seat, followed the Mass with great attention, and was smiling after the communion. It was the biggest thing to me. God bless you, Father, Lord of the earth and of heaven, because you kept these things hidden to the wise and the smart, and you revealed it to the small ones. Don Pierre Laurent, Cabantus.
Prima di salutarci vi ricordo.
Well, I would just like to remind you that the unique event of the meeting is the result, the surprising result of a cooperation, and only beauty and dialogue are at the basis of human life. The meeting is a place of culture. You can contribute to carry on this story. You will find the stations Dona Ora on the fairgrounds. You should make your donations with the volunteers wearing the red T-shirt with the logo Dona Ora. This year, the Meeting Foundation has become a third sector body, so this donation can be included in your tax statement. So an applause now for Don Camillo and Pepone from Brescello. And I would like to thank Eugenio Marcani, Corrado Medioli, Gianni Govi, and all the guests that participated in this meeting. Thank you. Good night.
Si fa quello che si può. Ho fatto.
La civiltà dell'amore, fratelli e sorelle, costruite senza stancarvi mai questa civiltà. Lavorate per questo, pregate per questo, soffrite per questo.